Hello and welcome to SummerWorks Career Sneak Peek series featuring Yen Azzaro. We're delighted to have you join us today. My name is Amanda DeLongchamp and I work at Amy Cell Talent and I will be facilitating today's session. With that, I would like to introduce our featured speaker, Yen Azzaro. Yen is delighted to share her career as an illustrator and graphic recorder, which can be translated to working with major companies, brands, and organizations, and as a social activist artist, which can be translated into acquiring grants, residencies, and fellowships.
All right, so like Amanda introduced me, thank you for that. I am an artist, an illustrator, and a graphic recorder. And here I am at the wall at a Ford Motor Company HR event, a human resources event, capturing what people say and are brainstorming in real time through illustration and text. So that's what I do to pay the bills most of the time. I'm a graphic recorder where I travel to places or now do this digitally and capture what people say. And then also during this COVID time where we've all been apart, I have surprisingly gotten a lot more illustration work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and show you a couple samples. And then the piece that I haven't talked about yet is artists. And when we think about who and what an artist is and what they do, I think some of us have ideas about, what kinds of things does an artist do? An artist paints or an artist draws. And if anything comes out of today, I hope that we have a more expansive definition of what artist means. Let's see. Did you drop the poll already? Did we do that?
No, let me do that right now for you.
Okay,
so here's our first
great.
poll, everybody.
Oh, do I need to stop the share to make that happen?
No, it's up. You're all good.
Oh, great. Okay, awesome. So when I was invited to give this talk, I had to think about the parts or the elements that I realized success had come from. And for me, it's really 4 parts. So my identity, who I am as a person, is really important to me. How I convey it, the professionalism that I bring to meetings, how prepared I am, that is incredibly important. Secondary to that, I think, is talent and skill. It is something that I've been doing since I was a kid. Nobody pushed me to do it. I always wanted to do it. So some of that is talent that I was born with, and a lot of that is really skill and practice every day, all the time. The third piece that is really important that I've come to realize as I build my career is duration. So how long you've been doing something. I have been graphic recording for 10 years and people say, oh, it must be so hard to listen and draw at the same time. And yes, it was very hard to do that in the beginning. But the longer you do something, whether it's soccer or swimming or writing, the longer you do it, the better you are at it. And then the most important thing of all is relationships. And, you've heard that saying, it's all in who you know, and it really is only all in who you know. So you take these 3 things, or I've taken these 3 things, and I've bundled them into a package. And then I have stayed in touch with people. And staying in touch with people doesn't mean going to them to ask for something. It means really staying in touch with people because you care about them and you want them to know that you care about them. And I do that with my clients. When it's appropriate, I text them on holidays that I know mean something to them, or I send them a card, or I send them an e-card just to let them know that I'm thinking of them.
Are you ready to see the results of the first poll, Yen?
Sure, I would love to.
All right. Are you able to see it? So We have 5 participants answered, and 3 out of 5 said that I make things every day, and then 2 out of 5 says I made or did something creative in the last 6 months.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. I am curious to know what those things are when we chat. Let's see. Here I am masked up in the back of the University of Michigan graduation mural that I just oversaw with my new friend, Liz, who is this really awesome person right here. She's a professor at the Stamp School of Art and Design, which is where I attended. And when I left U of M, I moved to Chicago with my now husband. And a lot of times the Alumni Association would come and ask for money, or I hosted an event for them. And I felt like, oh man, I just graduated from school. I'm paying off student loans. I don't feel like I'm part of the network yet. And so this is me back in May, right, for graduation, overseeing a group of Stamp art students. And I'll circle back to this later because I'm showing this for a reason. The network of people that I graduated with and moved away from 17 years ago has continued to stay in my life in a way that I didn't expect to. So when I was talking about relationships, this is part of that. After graduating, my husband Nick and I moved to Chicago, and it's where I did my first year of school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. But the first year I was in college, I couldn't cut it. Studio classes are 6 hours each, and I was taking between 3 and 4 studio classes. So that could be 18 hours or 24 hours of your week on top of academic classes. So you could imagine living in the city, taking about 32 to 38 hours of class, and I was working about 25 hours a week and never turning my homework in on time because I was up all night working and trying to get assignments done. It was really challenging. I'm not saying that to deter you from going to art school, but there are many of my friends that probably have masters and doctorates that were not in the classroom as much as I was. They were probably reading and doing other things, but being an artist is about being committed to the craft, and that means loving what you're doing and doing it a lot. After bouncing around for a little bit, I landed a job at my dream gallery. I was the marketing person at a gallery in Lincoln Park in Chicago called Madron Gallery, and we showed American Impressionism up through contemporary art. So everything from about 1890 to 1940, and then about 1940 up through current living artists. And that was it. That was my dream job. I worked there for 5 years. That is exactly what I said I wanted to do when I was in college. And eventually I became director, and we showed a fashion photographer named Stan Malinowski. That's the lower right-hand side. And he photographed people like Iman and Gia and Cindy Crawford and all of the early heyday supermodels. And on the upper left side, I did research on a modernist named William Schwartz. So here I am, I'm traveling and I'm meeting paintings on people's doorsteps. And I'm going to Sotheby's and Christie's, which are the auction houses in New York. And I'm there because my boss is bidding on things. And in the lower right-hand corner is Julian Stanchuk and his wife. And there's me in the middle and my colleague on the left. And behind us is one of his paintings. And he was a very well-known, famous op artist. So he painted works of art that were optical illusions that messed with your eyes. So I think I'm like maybe 29 years old there. I'm the director of a gallery. I think like I have it made. I love my job. I'm going to exhibits and parties and all these things. And then my mom got sick, and it was a really difficult time. I had some tough decisions to make. She is alive and pretty well today. But at that time, I was having so much fun. You know, we were hosting events like Slide Luck Pot Show. This is an event that happens worldwide. Probably not in person during COVID, but hundreds of people would gather and we would watch slideshows that we had curated, people's images and artwork that we would put together in advance. And everybody would bring a dish to pass. And we would just have these dinner parties with, 300-400 people, and it was really awesome. And around that same time, I curated a traveling exhibit of works by Robert Vaughna. So I thought this was like really great. I'm in my early 30s. I'm curating a traveling museum show. It was the first one like it ever that had gone from a private dealer to a museum. I felt pretty good about myself. And then I made the really, really difficult decision to move back to Michigan to help my mom out. And my husband, Nick, is a photographer, and he had been working pretty regularly in freelance photography. So he was traveling around the world and doing cool stuff. And we decided to move back to Michigan. And when we got back to Michigan, no jobs. We could not find any jobs. It was really disappointing and pretty painful. We tried to work with our alumni association network through U of M, and we were applying for jobs that we were not suited for them because it had taken me a long time to graduate. I'm now in my early 30s. I've only had maybe hit some jobs in high school, but maybe just a handful of jobs here and there. And didn't know what was going to happen in terms of where are we going to make money? How are we going to do it? I thought for a while that we were going to be art consultants. So I started this firm called Azzaro, which is my last name and my husband's last name. And we got a spot in downtown Ypsi at 9 South Washington, and I started doing art consulting and things out of it. And we had shows and they were very well attended. It was a small spot, so sometimes we would do things out in the street, and it was just a really fun, bustling time. And we held exhibits there. We had a Stan Malinowski show there, the fashion photographer I mentioned earlier. We started doing grant projects. So for those of you that are interested in working in the arts or any kind of nonprofit work, you may have heard about grants. And grants are money or resources that you would write an essay or application for, and then you would ask for resources or help based on who the grantor is. So they might have requirements or criteria for what you need to offer in order to get a grant. So this particular grant was through the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, and it was matched by Eastern Michigan University. And we worked with a high school student, a middle school student, and an elementary student. Nick guided them in taking photos, curating the photos, which means finding the best ones and putting them together. I assisted them in framing the photos, marketing the exhibit, publicizing the show, and inviting them and their families and the general public to an opening. So here is a student artist talking to an adult attendee about what his work is about. And each of those students was paid a stipend as well as sold work that night. So each student made no less than $400. Some of them made more from this experience. Here's an example of an exhibit that we would have shown. This is Margaret Hitch, who was a recent graduate from the Stamp School of Art and Design at U of M. This is Dave Eggers. He's a writer, producer, and also co-founder of 826, which is a nonprofit writing workshop organization. They do education, advocacy, and all kinds of really, really cool stuff all over the country. And this was a volunteer breakfast that we hosted. We just love this organization and wanted to do something for them. This is a camera Obscura. So this is our gallery space. And if you notice on the left-hand side, there's a black tarp. And this tiny flare of light that's coming into the room is the only light that was present. So if you had walked into this room and this hole was covered, it was completely dark and you could not see your hands in front of your face. From the outside, the light comes through and it projects the outside image onto the wall inside, but upside down. And this is exactly what happens inside a camera, a traditional camera that used to use a mirror. And this is what happens inside of our eyes. So when light enters our eye, it's filtering through the opening in our eye and it flips the image upside down. I can't explain the physics more than that, but when you look inside an old camera, that's why there's a mirror. The mirror flips it right side up so that you can see it the right side in the photo. And Nick installed this as kind of an educational piece. And we also installed it as an exhibit in our space that was free and open to the public. And we did this because we really believe that art should be consumed or taken in a way that is accessible for everyone. While I was a dealer selling expensive paintings and works and working with museums that had long reputations, we have noticed and we are very aware that there are very limited populations of people that go to museums regularly. There is definitely a culture of how people are welcomed or not welcomed in public spaces that show art. And so we wanted to and continue to find ways to share art with youth and with people to let them know that you can create anything. And that could include a camera Obscura in your living room. Around this time, that's my husband, Nick, on the right. He had been volunteering with Bright Futures, which is the after-school program out of EMU, and this is within Ypsilanti Community Schools, Romulus, Wayne, and some other Michigan Avenue corridor districts. And because of our lovely mentor and friend, Dr. Lynn Malinoff, who's the director there, she got these awesome digital SLRs, single lens reflex cameras. And these would be cameras that you might expect you'd spend a few $100s on, and an adult would use one, or a high schooler would use one. And here we have two young students who are using the DSLRs, who Nick was teaching to fully trust in and engage in their skills and their ability to be responsible for these cameras. And they just thrived at taking photos. As he was volunteering and we had the studio space, we met the superintendent back then at Ypsilanti Community Schools, Dr. Edmondson, and he ended up hiring both of us to revamp the entire marketing, the total outside persona of the school district. And so this is the logo that I created, which you'll still see around town now. And Nick ended up teaching photography there, and I ended up doing publicity and marketing there for 2 years. And he just left there this past year to go back to grad school. This is a photo of Michigan Avenue that Nick took not far from where our studio is or was. You might recognize some of the businesses there. When I talk about being an artist, or specifically an activist artist, we are interested in creating pieces that challenge people in the way they think about the world. So for quite a few years, Nick collected quotes about people in Ypsilanti that he found in MLive. And nowadays, MLive doesn't have a comment section on many of their articles because too many trolls were just ruining the environment and just being very abusive. And I'll read you what it says on this poster. It says, if the ones doing the protesting and shooting would put that effort to work to help clean up their own neighborhoods and go to work, maybe most of these problems could be stopped. This is from Old Timer 67. So what he did is took phrases verbatim and I laid them out and exactly how they were spelled, all the punctuation, everything onto large posters. And we asked about 20 of our friends and colleagues that live and work in Ypsilanti to do a public standing sculpture in the street. We paid for the street to be shut down. We didn't make any money on this exhibit, but we did it because we thought it was important to make. And the result of it was just incredibly powerful and potent. People came up to us on the street. People were crying. They were in shock. They were speechless. They couldn't believe the kinds of things that outsiders or even Ypsilantians thought about Ypsilanti and the people that lived there. The next Michigan Council for the Arts and Cultural Affairs grants that I received was also through a partnership with EMU. And we decided to do something about the traffic or the culture of traffic in Ypsilanti, particularly on Cross Street, which is really, really fast over by campus. We knew that policy changing and maybe even diverting the way that cars are parked on Cross Street could make a difference in how fast people drive and how dangerous it was right there. But I knew that, you know, making a parallel street into a diagonal parking street would take years. And so instead, a friend of ours is a professor at the U of M Art School, and he has a fleet of old auto plant adult tricycles. So these would have been used at Ford or GM on the auto floor to transport parts. And so these are like really muddy tires and they're hard to ride. And this is Tim, who fixes bikes up and tricks them out and sells them. And this project called Y Trike allowed me to invite 12 different organizations, including the sheriff's office, the library, the school district, Cultivate, the EMU art department, to work on these bikes. Here's Bill Burnett from the Auto Collision Program at Ypsi Schools, working with one of his students. They really did a really cool number on their trike. And here we are at the 4th of July parade, where we were voted People's Choice Best Exhibit. I collaborated with Cree Fuller, who is a local artist, and he tricked his trike out with one of those rocking horses. So that was really cool. So you've seen a lot of the work that we do and that I work on, and it's all very community and socially based. It's not brush on paper or pen on paper. It's all about moving spaces and experiences and working with people. In 2018, I applied for a grant as an artist. Nick and I were going to create a student social movement. So he was already teaching in the high schools, and I was still volunteering and working with some of the students. And the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation had a one-year $25,000 grant. And we applied for it as individual artists, which is hard to do. And I can tell you more about that if you're curious. Most grants want you to be a nonprofit, either a 501c3 or some other criteria for being a nonprofit. So this particular grant was really interesting because they were willing to grant it to individual artists. And Culture Source, which is a nonprofit in Detroit, if you're interested in the arts, you should see what they do. Culture Source was our fiduciary. That means that they held onto the funds for us and they distributed them to us. And we did not have to apply through an organization. We could apply as individuals. So this is the group Wi-Fi. It's the letters YFI, and it's short for Ypsi Fidelity. And we worked with Ypsilanti High School students, and we taught them what the word fidelity means. And it could mean the quality of something. You might have heard, high fidelity in records means that the sound quality is really good and translates really well. It can also mean a commitment to something or someone. So Ipsy Fidelity was our commitment to tell student stories in high quality. Here we are in Ipsy Library, which we got permission for to create loud photos. And we were always loud because we always wore matching fluorescent outfits. And eventually our program did grow up to 22 students. And so after school through Bright Futures, we were working with students on shaking hands, making eye contact, talking to adults, introducing ourselves, doing real life in space projects that made people uncomfortable. Maybe we would follow them slowly. Maybe we would do everything that they were doing, but in hyper speed. So we were practicing theatrical and social art in spaces, public spaces. This is the University of Michigan Museum of Art, where we laid down in the lobby, and the security guards let us do that. And these are statements that each of the students made. So nobody can bring me down. Fries before guys. And we traveled and did things in different public spaces. This is also at the art museum. This is our son, Ty, who had to go everywhere with us on all of the field trips. So he is honorary Wi-Fi. If any of you have ever been in downtown Ann Arbor, you may have seen the Violin Monster, who is this guy on the right. He has a public persona as a werewolf. He wears the mask no matter how hot or cold it is outside. And he was on America's Got Talent. So one day, Wi-Fi came and sat down, and we put his America's Got Talent audition up on the projector. And as they were watching it, the Violin Monster walked in and started playing, and it just blew their minds. And it was one of the coolest moments that I will ever remember, working with that fabulous group of students. The Violin Monster talked to us eventually in his real identity, which he does not normally do, about just the joys and the challenges of being a public persona, an artist, a musician, and relying on the public to make a living. Here we are in front of Angel Hall on U of M's campus, creating another physical formation. So if you want more information about that, you can go to Ipsy Fidelity. That grant ended this past December. So we are, that was a 2-year plus movement, and we moved into a lot of virtual and video-based projects. So if you go to this address, you can go to our YouTube channel and see the videos that we produced during COVID times when we couldn't be together. Awesome. This is graphic recording. This is what I do to make a living. I used to roll up a large piece of paper, or in this case, Shell, the fuel company, created a large canvas for me. And I would go and sit in a meeting and I would draw what people say. And this is a little bit dense. There's a lot of information here. And this is probably like 9 years ago, 2011, 17? 11. So that was 10 years ago. I wasn't that great at it. We had just moved back to Michigan from Chicago, and I was still feeling my way around, didn't know what I was going to do for a living. And this is one that I did during COVID with my friend Melvin Parson, who is the director of We the People Growers Association. And he helps to bring people back into a work situation on a farm with just so much dignity and grace after they have spent years being incarcerated. So he just has the most incredible organization and work ethic. And it's so awesome to work with somebody like that that has such vision. So we worked on this together. This is another example of a graphic recording I did for the Kalamazoo Community Foundation. They are a nonprofit that is doing a lot of work in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I created this during one of their day-long meetings. This is an example of a sketch note. So it's just like a graphic recording, but rather than being on a large piece of paper, it's on a small sketch size piece of paper. So I can take a lot more notes, and you'll notice it's like a thinner pen, and I can get lots more information. And this was for a food conference for MSU that I did during COVID, and I did 15 of these for them. This is digital. And so it is exactly what I've just shown you, but I'm doing this on an iPad. And it's a little bit different because when I spell something wrong, which does happen, I don't have to seriously get out the white tape or the touch-up stuff, and I can just rewind and keep going forward.
Is it easier for you to do it on an iPad or with your pen and paper or marker and paper?
I will say now, after 10 months of working more on the iPad, it's easier on iPad, but it was not like that in the beginning. I did not like it, was not used to it. But this is another example of marker on paper. And it, there's something really satisfying about tactile and touch, and I love that. But for ease and for just the client and the viewer engagement, people love seeing the time lapse, and I will show you one. The cool thing about what I do too is that there are so many ways to make money with illustration or with art. And one of the things that I think is so important about art, not just for art to make art and hopefully sell a piece of art, but art also to be used for commercial purposes. This is an ad I did for Ypsilanti Community Schools recently, and it's now an advertisement up in Briarwood Mall. And there's my son on the right. That I think it's so important that art conveys information to people, because a lot of times when we rely on art to communicate, people leave with the same assumptions as when they got there. And when it doesn't convey information, it doesn't challenge how people think or work or go about their lives. In Washtenaw County, Ypsilanti has a lot of disparities. There's quality of life, meaning how long you live, even your access to food and medicine and education even varies drastically between Washtenaw County. And Ypsilanti is always seen as like the underdog. And I hope that through uplifting our school district and uplifting Ypsilanti's name, that you would see something like this and feel really good about it. This is an example of something I did for an education organization recently. And this would be a good time actually to show you a time lapse. So this is how I made it, made something like that. It starts out on the iPad, and this is a 1-hour talk. And as people are talking, I'm listening for themes and jotting down notes. And this drawing with the flowers and the vegetables probably took me about 5 minutes, maybe less, because I gotta listen and I gotta start writing. So this was a discussion where they were gathering end of conference ideas. I'll show you a little bit more. This is 1 minute and 50 seconds. Most of my work right now in this moment, the next 2 weeks, is all in food conferences. During COVID, most of my for-profit clients, the big clients that are like Fortune 500, they did not come back during COVID. All of my clients have been nonprofit, which I love because they're much more human-centered, I feel like.
Mhm.
And getting to draw pictures about what people eat and how we get our food and how we can get food to kids is so much more interesting to me than a lot of other stuff I've done.
I have to say, I wish we had your work for the conferences I attend. I think it would really help retaining a lot of the information.
Oh, yeah. So that's an example of that. If you go to my website, which I'll show you in a little bit, the time lapse for this video is there. And that's the paperpusher.co. I know it's 10:09, so I'm going to get through these next few. When I was talking earlier about information within art, I think it's so important to empower people to know about where it is that they live and how their lives affect other people's lives. So this is in downtown Ann Arbor at the corner near Carytown, where the farmers market takes place. And from the 2019 US Census, the estimated population of Washtenaw County is 367,000 people. And in our county, there is a 16-year difference between the life expectancy of Latino men that live between 48104, which is downtown Ann Arbor, and 48198, which is the eastern zip code in Ypsilanti, favoring residents in Ann Arbor by 16 years. So that is not just like a number that they pulled out of nowhere. This is data that's collected from who you are when you check into the hospital, who's getting sick, who is passing away. I created a 14 by 17 foot sidewalk mural, and the colors are all the different, are most of the zip codes in Washtenaw County. And the giant red line right here, I did not label it on the mural. That's US 23 running north and south. And on this side, 48104, 108, 105, north side Ann Arbor, 03, west side Ann Arbor. The life expectancy on this side of 23 is 85 years. Doesn't matter what gender you are, what ethnic, religious, race, any identity markers. It is 85 on this side of 23, and it's 76 on this side of 23. And that's 48198, 48197. So what I was trying to do was pull people in by these really popping map colors. And then when you get there, I kind of hit you with these hard statistics of there's a huge disparity in how we're living life in our county. And this was also a grant through the Ann Arbor Downtown Association and the Arts Alliance. So our poverty rate for children under 5 is really, really high in Washtenaw County. And you would be surprised because you think, oh, we're the most educated city in America. And our poverty rate for kids under 5 is almost 20%. And for Black children, it's 58%. And for Hispanic children, it's 29%, which is heartbreaking and unacceptable to me. This is a piece that I did on the forgotten or no longer existing Black historical monuments and moments in Ypsilanti. And I did this during Ypsi Glow, which is the counterpart to Ann Arbor's Best of Fools or Full Moon. And these glow in the dark at night for Ypsi Glow. This is my most recent mural project with the city of Ann Arbor. I worked with 30 volunteers to paint this mural. It's two-sided and there's 2 posts at Gallup Park. And during COVID, I've been teaching people how to do this, how to use illustration to create longer memories, help you retain notes. It's really helpful for students to do this. So I've been doing this for about the last 6 months. And I do teach illustration to students for free. Once classes start again, I will be publicizing student classes. They are 1 hour, usually on a weekend morning, not too early. And anybody that is participating today can take that class for free. Even though I normally cut it off at age 18, happy to open it up to summer work folks. And this is how I package it professionally for adults so that we can learn how to organize our days a little bit better. And that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing again. And I want to go ahead and open up. So we did have a question actually just in the last couple of minutes. And I think it's important to open up to the group that someone asked if they're getting the slides at the end of the talk. And the answer is no. However, there will be a recording of all of the slides on SummerWorks YouTube page.
I'm happy to take questions if anybody has them.
Oh, so we had someone ask, do you think traditional artists, such as non-graphic painters, drawers, etc., can make a living in our digital world? If so, how? It seems like an artist with only pencil and paper has it much harder than the digital ones. That's a great question. Thank you.
Such an important question. I will assume that most of you are familiar with Instagram, and I would urge you to look at hashtags, if like specific to this question, hashtag pencil illustrator, hashtag graphite drawings, hashtag traditional art. What you will find is that because of the digital medium, well, let me back up. So when I was a dealer at a gallery, that was really hard to break into. People would send portfolios and call and all the time. And I would say, I'm really sorry. We have our roster filled up for the next 15, 18, 20 months. And it was so limited and it was so exclusive and it would just break my heart. And then when we moved back, we started showing artists, like people's work that I would see on the street or meet or see their website. And I would approach them and I'd say, you are so talented. I want to show your work. The problem with that is that that is like a tiny itsy bitsy percentage. So back to Instagram, go on there, look up those hashtags, go to Faber-Castell, some of I'm gonna write that in there, the art supplies sites that endorse artists, or what are some other, I'll think of some other ones and drop them in the chat. Look at the Instagram persona that these people have built. They have built an entire brand on Instagram. Some of them are on TikTok. They have created a storefront right there on a social media site where they have thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of followers that find their work, hire them, buy their work through their shop. So even though I think it's really, really difficult and challenging to make it as an artist, it is also in some ways easier because the vehicle is free. Right now, Instagram is free and it is open for the world to see. So take really good photos. Don't take grainy photos, dark photos in the corner, your hands in the picture. Take bright, well-lit, exciting, fun, consistent photos. Look at the artists that have the most followers. Look at how consistent their Instagram page is. Look at how bright the photos are, how high quality they are. You do not need a DSLR. You could use your cell phone. It just has to be well lit. And I can, answer questions about that if you have questions about photography. But I'd say Instagram is probably one of the most powerful tools for artists right now. So that was a fantastic question.
Awesome. And then I was wondering, what led you, Yen, to pursue art as a career?
Hmm. Well, I've always been interested in art, and it was such an escape for me. And it's taken me a long time to come around to like the very honest answer about this question. So my parents immigrated to the United States when I was 2.5. And for reasons that I won't get into, we moved from the time that I was 3 until I think I was in 5th grade. We moved cross country 8 times. So we moved from Michigan to California to Florida, back to Michigan to New Orleans, back to California, and then back to Michigan. And then I lived in a small town of Tecumseh, and then eventually came to Ann Arbor when I was in 6th grade. And so when you are moving that much, first of all, it's hard to stay friends with people, but it's also hard to know what the heck is going on in the classroom, right? Like there was only like maybe 2 grades that I ever finished from beginning to end. And I think I was a smart kid, but I wasn't a very good student because I was always catching up to whatever that teacher or what that class was doing. And the one constant for me was reading and drawing. So I could do that in the back of a Nissan hatchback for hours on end while you're driving cross country. And so that for me really solidified just the basic skills. And then I just took more art classes and just kept going with it. And it's never been a question for me. It's just always been there.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm going to take this opportunity to also send out our last poll question. So for everyone attending today, has your outlook changed in pursuing a creative career? So I just launched it. There are no wrong answers. So it could be, yes, it's my future, maybe, but I want to learn more. Not really for me. It's not for me, but I know someone who would be really interested.
And I see a really great question about advice you'd give someone at the start of their career. I want to get into graphic design and fashion photography. Mm-hmm. So one of the things about creative careers is when you first start, you do not turn down money, right? Like that's just the very basic gist of making a career in the arts is you do things that may not be your specialty, but you take them because they pay money and we all need to eat. So I did graphic design for many years, and it's only been in the last few years that I've started turning down the work because I don't want to do it. And the thing with both of these pieces that you've described, graphic design and fashion photography, is that there's a lot of people that want to get into it, but there's not a lot of people that have longevity in it. So if you want to do fashion photography, you can do that in your backyard in 10 minutes. You can go on TikTok, Instagram, look at fashion magazines, take basic photography classes. WCC is the best resource for photography in the area, hands down. See how other people have done it. Understand the basic rules. Understand the basic rules of graphic design, of composition, of artwork, photography, painting, because all of those things are the same in both of these mediums that's awesome, going there this fall, that you are interested in. Go to museums. The University of Michigan Art Museum is free. Go online and look at artwork and graphic design at MoMA in New York. Look at graphic design in graphic design magazines. Look at all different kinds of print. See how people are doing it and understand the foundations of it, because a lot of times with these mediums that we want to do, we see them on TikTok or we see them on Instagram, and there's all kinds of rule breaking. You can break rules once you know the foundation. The reason that some graphic design looks so good is because that person started with the very, very basic foundation of, here are two black circles. Place them on a paper to make them look lonely, make them look mad, make them look happy. And when you understand that foundation, you can build anything on top of that. And that's the same of photography. But get the foundational skills so that nobody can ever mess with you. There's nothing worse than getting picked apart on social media or for not doing something technically right when you could have learned that in the very, very beginning. So if you're just starting, I'd say my two biggest pieces of advice are, never say, I'm just a student, I'm just starting out. Never say that out loud to anybody. And read, look at, and take in everything that you possibly can. What will happen is that you'll start to know what is good and what is bad. People say, oh, you know, art and creativity and anything that is fluid like that is all, it's all subjective. It's based on preference. Yes, but you also know that if somebody intended to sculpt an arm and they sculpted it too long, you know there's something wrong with that. That's why there are rules and there are canons. Canons are the ways that things are supposed to be, how we find them in nature, and how we compare design and art to it. So never say that you're a newbie, and get all of the knowledge that you can so that you know what you're talking about.